Broadcasting from the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University. Welcome to Sunshine Startups Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, bright ideas, and experts on the startup ecosystem. And now your hosts of Sunshine Startups Live, Jim Ryan and John Wensveen.
Hi, and welcome to another great episode of Sunshine Startups Live. I'm your host, entrepreneur, investor, and startup enthusiast, Jim Ryan. I'm joined by my colleague and friend here at the Levan Center, John Wensveen. John, great to be with you again, my friend.
Great to be with you again, Jim. Welcome to the world's first theme park for entrepreneurs, the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, a true economic engine having local, regional, national, and international impact. And I'm a little bit stumped with my opening because the Levan Center, we're going to hear a little bit about that today because the name on the side of the wall is live with us today.
It is. It's truly an exciting episode for us here. And as John mentioned, you know, the name's on the marquee. And I wanted to share Alan Levan's background. If you go to LinkedIn and you see Alan on there, you're not going to see much. But what he does and what he has done for the state of Florida, various communities, has been incredibly impressive. And I wanted to share some of his background to sort of spare him some time talking today on the podcast. So 30 years plus as chairman of BBX Capital. It's a diversified holding company. Background obviously significant in real estate and various companies. Served as chairman of the New York Stock Exchange listed companies. And I thought this was quite interesting. In 1971, at the age of 27, founded IRE Financial, which was the predecessor for BBX Capital. And over the next 10 years, raised hundreds of millions of dollars, built a national portfolio of real estate exceeding $1.5 billion in value. Alan spearheaded the acquisition development of several planned communities throughout the state, across the country, and a tremendous amount of square foot residential and commercial space. After acquiring control of Bank Atlantic in 1984, Alan has built the company into a 100-branch firm, $6 billion Florida banking franchise, and later led its sale to BB&T. And BBX Capital has invested in acquired businesses in banking, retail, investment banking, hospitality, timeshare, through Bluegreen Vacations, real estate, and as I mentioned, in other sectors. He's also served as CEO of Bluegreen Vacations and the Bluegreen Corporation. He served on the Nova board here for many years, and we are going to get to Alan, but his background is so extensive, and really some of these things need to be called out. He served as chairman here at NSU, contributor and supporter amongst several programs here at Nova, a generous gift here to the Levan Center, where John mentioned his name is on the marquee, and he's helped build and support the innovation here which bears his name. And part of his philanthropy, between he and his wife and the Levan family, he is founder and chairman of BBX Capital Foundation, contributed over $15 million to the South Florida community. So I'm really excited to have you here, Alan. And one of the things, obviously, as we talk about entrepreneurship in the state of Florida, you've also won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award here in the state of Florida. So John and I are really excited to have you here. And John, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that background.
It's the longest opening we've ever done.
It is. It is.
So this is great. And, it's a pleasure and an honor, of course. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Alan. So it's more than a philanthropic donor to NSU and the Levan Center. He is the visionary behind why all of this exists. So we're going to learn a lot more as we go.
We are, and Alan, again, thanks for carving the time out to be here. I'll tell you, I was here at an event with you and John, and in between a couple of cocktails, John pointed to me and said, "We've got to get Alan on the show, on the podcast." And I said, wow, of course. And so I wanted to talk, as John as well, and about your background and amongst the millions of folks, you're originally from New York, came down to Florida. What brought you and the family down here to Florida? What was sort of the inspiration back in the day?
So let me just start by saying good morning.
And good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time you're listening.
This should be fun, and it hasn't escaped me that this is John's payback he's decided to interview me to make up for when I interviewed him.
It was the most grueling interview I've ever had. All 16 hours of it.
We'll have to have a podcast on that in itself.
So your question, if I still remember it, is how did I find my way down to Florida? So I born in Brooklyn, and I was in New York, Brooklyn, then Long Island, until I was about 15. My father wanted to escape the rat race in New York, and so we moved to Miami, and I grew up in Miami. So I went to we came down in 1959, and so I went to I started in ninth grade down here, and went to middle school, high school, and then off to Tulane University after high school.
And then you came back to Florida from Tulane. Obviously, you started building your roots here with your family. And then, was your first interest opportunity in real estate? Was sort of the inspiration there, and what brought you into that vertical?
So I've always had an interest in business. At the time I wanted to be in business, I had no idea what that meant. And my father was in the exterminating business with a few trucks, and he was a working owner, and so there were many summers that I accompanied him, going out and in the truck and going to people's homes, doing pest control services. But I always wanted to go back to New York. Even though we left when I was early at 15, I thought I really loved New York, whatever that means to a 15-year-old. So after high school, I went to Tulane University, and the only place that I had sights on was going back to New York after school. And my father was smart enough not to try to discourage me. I guess he figured, well, he'll figure it out for himself. And so I went to New York, had no idea what I was going to do, but I decided to interview banks. And that would give me, since I didn't know what I wanted to do in business, but I knew I wanted to be in business, I figured banking would be that answer. And through a really series of coincidences, I ended up at JP Morgan on Wall Street in their training program. And it was there that I got interested in real estate. And I was asked to do a credit analysis of somebody who actually I knew, and I went to high school with, and he had raised a lot of money internationally to buy real estate, and I read that file early on, and so literally within a matter of weeks, I called my dad and I said, "Well, guess what? I'm going to come back to Florida. I'm going to come back to Miami, but I need to be here for a couple of years to get some experience." And so I came back to Miami to go to into the exterminating business as a stepping stone to get into the real estate business. In fact, when I told my supervisor at JP Morgan that I was leaving, and he said, "Really, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going back to Miami to go in the exterminating business." He looked at me and he said, "Boy, did I make a mistake with you?" So I came back. I was an exterminator. I would go house to house to house. It was my father's company. My mother was the bookkeeper. My brother had graduated University of Florida in the field of entomology, which was in the exterminating field. And he and I were on roofs putting up tents and lawn spraying in the big trucks and the masks that you wear when you're spraying lawns. And I went to find my way into the real estate business.
And now here you are. And as Jim read the history of all the successes that you have on your track record. Can we talk a little bit about BBX and then Bluegreen Vacations, and what exactly does this empire entail? And then I think we're going to get more into your journey of the vision and behind where we are today. But let's give a little context to how that empire was built and what exactly it is. Because people know your name, they hear BBX, but often don't understand how deeply rooted it is, not just in this community, but truly across the nation.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I founded BBX, I'm thinking it's 50 years ago at this point, in the early 70s. But I didn't found it as BBX. It went through a number of different name changes over the years, but the same company. So my father actually introduced me to somebody that he sat next to at a Dolphin game, who had a mortgage firm, and he said, "Well, why don't you go see this fella? Maybe he can help you get into the real estate business." And so I went to see him. He was a few years older than I was, but had a wealthy father. And I went to see him and just said, I'm looking to get in the real estate business. You got any ideas? And crazy as this might sound, he said, "Well, why don't we be partners?" And I said, "Well, that's a great idea, but I don't have any money."
That doesn't happen every day.
And he said, Go find a piece of real estate that we can develop and build, and we'll be partners. So I was working as an exterminator during the day, and I was looking for real estate at night and on the weekends. And I found a piece of land in North Miami Beach, and I went to him and said, "Well, I got this piece of land, and I think, and it's zoned for multifamily." He said, "Great. Why don't you get plans developed and build it?" And I said to him, my mouth dropped open. I said, "I don't know the difference between a windowsill and a roof tile. What does that mean?" And he said, "You'll figure it out." And so I got introduced to an architect that was a newly branded architect, first year. And I said, "Can you design me a 42-unit apartment building?" which is what I was told we could put on the site. And I sat with him for a couple of months by his side while he was drawing this thing. And then I got these drawn, and I went back to my quote-unquote partner and said, "So I've got this land under contract. I've now got plans. I think it's probably time to close on the land. So where's the money coming from?" And he said, "Don't worry about it. I will finance it through my mortgage company." And so I'm getting to think that this guy thinks I'm a genius, but unfortunately, he had done that with like a dozen other people as well. And when the recession hit in the mid-'70s, 11 of the dozen went broke, taking him down with it. And I was the one that survived. So to complete that story, I had now had the plans. We closed on the land. I was interviewing general contractors, and I decided, you know what? I'm never going to learn how to do this with a general contractor. I'm going to build this myself. So one of the people I had interviewed was a labor contractor who had a license. And I said, will you pull the permit and help me, and I will be the quasi general contractor. And so I built it, and his mortgage company financed it. And then it was now finished, ready to start renting. And I said, "Well, are you going to get us a permanent mortgage? Because we only had a construction loan. And it was a time in the economy where he could not get a permanent mortgage, which was a problem, obviously. And so I did some research and decided that I would, instead of renting this as apartments, I would convert it to condominiums. And in the late 60s, condominiums in Florida were like a brand new concept. And so while we couldn't get a permanent loan to finance this apartment building long term, I was able to get, I went to one of the SNLs, and I was able to get a commitment for individual home mortgages or condo mortgages to buyers.
So for individual units.
For individual units. So it wasn't a master loan, it was a commitment for individual loans. And because my partner's mortgage company had financed it, I could get the releases as I would sell it. And so I had now built it. I was now the salesperson. And I sat in the office and I sold out 42 condo units. He was happy. I was happy, and he said, "Well, go do that again." And so, literally within the next 2 years, I was able to acquire 1,000 apartment units in Miami-Dade. One of them, and the way that happened is I ran into somebody who was in the furniture rental business, and we were just chatting, and he said, "You know, you're in the real estate business. Maybe you can help me out." I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, I've furnished these units in Miami Springs, and on a rental basis, and the owner of the property is not paying me, and I think it's in foreclosure." So I went to the lender, which was Southeast First National Bank at the time, which ultimately became bank after bank after bank, became First Union, and then I don't know where that bank ended up. But in any case, we were able to resolve the lender's problem, and we got 100% financing to buy this building. And then the furniture guy was so happy about that, he came back to me and he said, "I have another project I'm not getting paid on, and this will blow your mind because it blew mine." This was a 448-unit apartment building that was on the Doral Country Club bordered the Doral Country Club. And it was financed by an REIT out of Atlanta. I did the same thing. I went up to Atlanta, said, "You know, perhaps I can help you out of this problem." They converted. They agreed to convert their loan to us. The developer that owned it was happy to do that because they weren't going to have to be in litigation and get a deficiency judgment against them. And so we now acquired 448 units, and then along the way some other units. And so we now had a portfolio of 1,000 units. And then just to complete the story of your question, John, I went to a seminar in the Four Ambassadors in Miami that was marketed as a investing in real estate. And I've always been very curious. So I walk into this ballroom at the Four Ambassadors, and there's like 500 people in this ballroom for this seminar. And I'm looking around and saying, what in the world are these people here for? And these two fellas show up on the stage, and they're marketing limited partnerships. And they said that the tax law had just recently changed, where only wealthy investors could invest together to a limit of 25 investors. But the tax law had just changed in 1971, where you now could have an unlimited number of limited partners with a single general partner. And these two fellows were basically the same age as I was. And all these people in the audience were financial planners, that raise money and real estate brokers. And I took the brochure. I went home. That afternoon, I called a friend of mine who was a lawyer, and I said, do you know how to do an SEC-registered limited partnership? He said, no, but I can figure it out. And we filed a $10 million limited partnership offering with the SEC in 1971. I hired the two guys that were in the seminar, that did the seminar, to be my marketing agents.
That was smart.
To be my marketing agents. And we went to market, raising money from financial planners all over the country. And we didn't have enough money to buy real estate. So we did this in sequence. First, we raised our money. Then we were a little bit behind the 8 ball in buying the real estate, but we bought the real estate. And then we had to figure out how to manage it. But I couldn't accelerate that because we only had enough money for what we were doing at that moment. And so we raised our $10 million, which led to another offering and another offering and another offering. And so we raised more than $100 million in 1972 to 1974. Then the recession hit. We actually had stopped raising money a year before the 1974 recession because we were raising so much money that I felt uncomfortable raising that money. So we stopped, got our act together in property management, and then in 1974, the real estate market collapsed, totally collapsed. But we had spent a year getting ready for something. We didn't know what it was. I was too young to understand the economics of the country and what a recession was. But we managed to get through it, and that went on for 5-6 years. And then we went back to the same market. Now we raised hundreds of millions of dollars doing exactly the same thing, and we bought real estate all over the country. So in case you were interested, that's the story.
Very interested, and I love the story.
It's a great story, and I love the humble beginnings and the creativeness, the entrepreneurial spirit is really wonderful. Alan, talk about BBX today. So it's a holding company. There's a number of diversified properties in it. I shared a little bit about it in the beginning, but talk about what makes BBX Capital today. And
So Jim, if I can, let me give you a message or a lesson.
That would be great. Absolutely.
From my early days, which will relate to all entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs always have a problem, and that is their vision generally is way ahead of anybody they talk to. And so everybody they talk to about their idea is a naysayer. It can't be done. You can't do that. One of the early experiences I had is we now had an approved SEC registration. We were designing what the registration was going to look like, what this program was going to look like. And I went to Wall Street to talk to the brokerage firms about raising money for us. And everyone said, no, you can't structure it this way. You have to do it this way. They didn't commit to give us any money, but they told us how to structure it. And then we'd go to another brokerage firm, and they would give us the same advice, but different advice. That A, this is not going to be successful because you didn't design this properly. And finally, I just put my pencil down, designed it the way I wanted it, figured I would file the registration statement so that I could now raise the money and I would take the shot. But it was going to be my product that I had done a lot of research. It was my product that I felt comfortable with, and I was going to make it work. And all entrepreneurs have exactly the same issue. Your family loves you, so they think you're a genius. But when you go to market with your product, everybody's got a suggestion as to why this is not going to work and why you're wasting money, and more importantly, why they're not going to invest with you. And so you just have to believe in what you're doing. You just have to be confident that you're going to be successful, and you just trudge through. So, so Jim, back to your question. So what happened next? So I was in that business, and in 1983, I got this idea with regard to the banking industry. Let me see if I can give you the sequence. So in those days, from the recession, many of the banks, particularly the S&L industry, were really capital deficient. And, to some extent, it's kind of exactly what's happening right now in the market, and that is the banks bought long-term assets, call it mortgages or treasuries, at a fixed rate. So you can lock in a fixed rate at 10 years today at almost 5%. That's great. But where does the money come from to buy that? So today, if you're in the banking business, that money comes from depositors. So now you can have a 10-year asset, and in those days was a 30-year asset, which was a mortgage, and you funded it with short-term deposits because you were getting deposits in the branches from customers. But when interest rates went up, you had to pay your depositors more and more money, but the asset that you bought had a fixed rate. And at the same time, the government allowed Merrill Lynch to issue a money market checking account, which was not FDIC insured, but was very attractive, and they could pay any rate they wanted. And so disintermediation took place where a saver who had $10,000 in a bank at 2% was able to find a Merrill Lynch money market fund at 5%. And so the money was leaving the banks, the depositors, but banks don't keep that kind of money because it's invested in assets. So all the banks, the S&Ls, were going through a crisis where there was a deterioration of their capital. So the banks were, the S&Ls, which were mutuals, were converting to public company to raise money. And I figured out how to participate in that in a way that was hugely beneficial. There's not enough time. You'll have to read my book for this. There's not enough time here to give you all the details. But at the end of the day, the government said, if you're an S&L and you have $50 million in capital, you can raise money, but you have to offer it to the depositors. And the way it worked out is you'd end up offering it to the depositors at 50% of book value with the new money. Well, S&L depositors were not investors. They wanted the FDIC insurance. So I figured out that basically nobody was taking advantage of that. Then, after all the depositors had their ability to do that, you then could do a public offering. And basically, the public offering would be at book value. And then, about 2 years later, the New York or Midwestern banks would come in and want to acquire a Florida bank for 2 times book value. So I literally opened up a $100 savings account with every S&L in Florida, 50 S&Ls. And I had a $100 savings account. So as each S&L went to market, I was able to I got a letter with the ability to subscribe to this offering. And it said, very simply, for your $100, you can buy a proration of the money we're raising. And at a $100 deposit, that entitled us to like 0.00003 of this offering, which was like nothing. But then the second box said, would you like to buy more if it's not fully subscribed? And I
Check every box.
checked that box that said, yes, we'll buy up to 9.9%. And so you can just imagine these S&L managers opening these envelopes, and all of a sudden it says somebody's buying 9.9% of their bank. And where did I get that money? Well, we had made that kind of money in the real estate business through our public offerings. And so you could almost time this. About a month later, we would get sued by the bank for trying to take over the bank, which I had no interest in doing, nor did I know how to do that. And in every case, we won those lawsuits because we were a passive investor. And then they went to market to sell their bank. And so we made a ton of money doing that. And then one of those banks turned out to be this bank in Fort Lauderdale. It was an S&L called Atlantic Federal, and they sued us. We got into litigation with them, and we settled the litigation, and I went on their board. And I was on.
I would say you won that case then.
Yes. Well, we never got to court.
Oh, that's okay.
But we were going to win. We were going
Right.
to win, and we settled it by my going on their board. I was on their board for about 6 months, and the board came to me and asked me if we could take control of the bank. And I said, well, I don't know anything about the banking business. I was at J.P. Morgan for 2 years as a lowly trainee, but that wouldn't give me experience to run the bank. But P.S. That did work out. I did become CEO and chairman of the bank, and we took this very poorly run, undercapitalized S&L. We changed the name to Bank Atlantic. There were 50 branches at the time we bought it, with $2 billion in deposits. I closed 30 of the branches, stopped advertising for rate, so we lost $1 billion in deposits, and then we started to rebuild it. And with $1 billion less in deposits, we were making more money because now we were operating like a commercial bank, paying checking account rates as opposed to S&L rates. And we grew the bank to 100 branches, the largest Florida-based bank, and we had all sorts of stuff. We were open 7 days a week. We gave doggy biscuits in the drive-through. We just were really a wow factor bank, and we grew it to $6 billion. And then, long story, 25 years later, sold it to BB&T, which is now Truist, part of Truist.
So there's a trend here throughout this entire discussion. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this, at least a half a dozen times, and yet you've gone out, you've figured out how to do it. And just a side note, Alan always has doggy biscuits in his pocket because you never know when there's a dog walking around, just so you know. And so now let's talk a little bit, and we're going to get to your book as well.
By the way, John,
yes,
the same thing existed when we created the Levan Center.
You gave me a doggy biscuit?
No, I'm sorry. I had no idea what I was doing.
I was going to say the cookie was really good, but I didn't know. But so this is really a segue into this, and well, there's two things. So there's a couple of different times that I've heard you say this to me and to others, that if you were to apply for a job today, you're not employable, and there's a huge message behind this. Can you expand upon that?
So the computer age passed me by. My kids grew up in the advent of the computer, and the problem I had is every time I wanted to learn it, my oldest son particularly, who was very bright, I would say, can you show me how to use this machine? And he would say, of course, Dad, this is so simple, which as soon as he said it was so simple, the hair would go up on the back of my neck like, I'm not going to understand this. And so as a result, I never learned how to use a computer. When the iPad came out, that was easier for me. And so, we employ over 8,000 people, and every one of them has to be totally computer literate, except me. And for years, I never even had a computer on my desk. Today, I have a big monitor, which I use for email and Zoom calls and Teams calls. But the fortunate thing is our companies have always been large enough that I can always grab somebody and say, can you do this for me? The other thing you might be interested to know is I never took a math class in college because my math skills on paper are not that good. And I was able to get out of taking math in college because I became a philosophy major, and the logic piece satisfied my math requirement. But I can do math in my head, but I just can't demonstrate to the professor how I got there. So, you remember the old examples of there's a train leaving New York at 8 o'clock, and there's
I hated that one.
Another train leaving Washington,
gets there
D.C.
first?
And where do they meet? I could do those in my head, but when the professor would say, "Show me how you got there," I couldn't. I couldn't do it then, and I can't do it now. But I can look at a spreadsheet, I can look at financials, and I can generally understand whether they're correct or not.
That's interesting tidbits for our audience. You obviously had tremendous success looking at opportunities, but you mentioned, mathematics was kind of baked in your head. Maybe troubles and challenges on paper. So what did you use? It sounds like there's instinct, you said logic. So when you look at a potential opportunity, even today, what are you relying upon? How much of that is instinct and the algorithm that's in your head versus maybe something else that might be presented to you?
So first of all, Jim, you talk about opportunities. So I strongly believe in the saying that that opportunities present themselves to those that are open to them. And so, we all get opportunities every day. The question is, do we see the opportunity? And I've been fortunate enough to, I write things down, and when we hit the banking crisis in 2007, in order to get through that recession, I called upon, in my head and on things I'd written down 20, 25 years earlier of concepts and opportunities that I had seen of how to raise money and how to keep capital strong, et cetera. But directly to your question, the answer is yes. I'm not a rocket scientist. Things around math are not easy for me, but I do use the logic, and so I have trained myself to see an opportunity and figure out what the downside is, and can I survive the downside, and then visualize what the upside could be. And if I can survive it not working, then I can go for the upside.
And I can vouch for that as well. So one thing I think is really unique about you versus other business people is often we're talking about all the bright, shiny things, all the great things that one can do versus looking at it also from the other way about what's the worst case scenario so that you've always got a contingency plan in place to be able to survive and then thrive. And that's a bit of a segue into where we are here today. So if you talk about the Levan Center and the original vision behind it, and you said just a few moments ago, I didn't know how to do this, and yet here we are. What was the stimulus to create an innovation center that's probably evolved into something beyond what anybody ever thought it would be, including myself? And what was the premise that said, hey, we got to do something here in South Florida?
So I would start by saying I deeply believe in giving back. You know, I've been very fortunate in my life, not without its downsides, not without its issues like anybody would have, but I've been fortunate enough, on balance, to be successful. Some would call it lucky, and I think there's some strong element of luck, you know, with anything that we do. But giving back has always been a family objective. We started with nothing, and as we got more successful, you know, giving back to the community was very important to us. More specifically, I became a trustee at the university over 20 years ago, and also, you know, during that period of time, there was a period where I served a term as chairman of NSU. NSU, by the way, is the superstar of universities. The university is 59 years old now. It's the youngest university in the top 200 of U.S. News and World Report. I will tell you, because we're in South Florida, if we're compared to University of Miami, at 50 years old, University of Miami was still Suntan U. It was still a play school. That's where people went to enjoy the sun and have a good time. And so NSU has been a serious university for a long time. And when we were 50 years old, we were so far ahead of University of Miami when they were 50 years old. So now University of Miami is 100 years old. You can only imagine where this university is going to be 10 years from now and 20 years from now. While I was fortunate to be on the board as a trustee and chairman, I also had an opportunity to go to Chicago, really unrelated to the university, but I got to visit an innovation center in Chicago called 1871. 1871 is the date of the Chicago fire. And Jay Pritzker funded a 50,000 feet in a building for an innovation center, and as a rental, and that innovation center just took off and is just incredibly successful. So, you know, I just tucked that in the back of my head. I wasn't there to look at an innovation center. I was there because we had a problem in one of our businesses we wanted solved, and I went there to see if we couldn't solve it. Subsequently, I attended a presentation at the Broward Workshop, which is a business organization here in Fort Lauderdale, in Broward County. And this was a presentation by technology people from major companies here in Broward County. And what they said was the largest challenge that they had was finding skilled talent. That they had great companies, that had great ideas, but the talent pool was not where they had hoped it would be, and it was difficult to recruit people from outside the area to come here, and also had learned that from a county perspective, it was difficult to recruit companies to relocate here because they were concerned about the talent pool. And so at some point in time during my chairmanship at the university, I approached George Hamberry, the CEO and president, and I said, you know what, I would like to create an innovation center for NSU. And the floor that we're in now is the 5th floor of the university library, which happens to be a public-private partnership with Broward County, which in and of itself was very innovative at the time. And so I said to Dr. Hamberry, if you will fund some of this, you and I can go to the county and we will ask the county for money to build this. And so we went to the county, we made a case, recognizing, again, as John said and I said, I'm not an expert at this. This was a vision that I had. But apparently the concept was so compelling to the county that not only did they unanimously vote in favor of it, but each one wanted to speak in favor of it separately from the vote. And they agreed to give us $7 million, $5 million and then another $2, $7 million. The university put in $7 million. And my wife and I and the Levan family put in several $1 million as well. And we were off to the races. So we had to, all we started with was a totally empty floor. Even though the library was 20 years old, the university was astute enough not to develop the top floor because they didn't know what the future of libraries was even 20 years ago. And so with an empty floor, I hired an architect and designer, and we wanted a facility that was a wow facility because literally every university has an innovation center, every university of note in the country. But some of them are successful and some of them are not. And we wanted to make this world-class. And in order to make it world-class, we had to make sure that people believed that we knew what we were talking about and that we could be successful. Because people are attracted to other people who they believe will be successful. Mm-hmm. And so there was no looking back. I committed to the county that we would be successful, and I committed to the university. And so, what remained was building this facility, which turned out to be a wow facility, and attracting an executive director, which John was, was in market, doing great things. And, you talk about being fortunate and lucky. I was able to attract John here. Actually, the university was fortunate to attract John because, I'm the chairman of the Levan Center, but John's reporting lines are in the university, and John's done a phenomenal job in the short time.
It was the dog biscuit.
So John's done a phenomenal job since he's here, and we've turned a lot of heads. Mm-hmm. And with each success that we have here, it brings more success. It brings more donors. It brings more people that want to be a part of something that's very unique and very special. You cannot take a tour here without walking away and saying, that was amazing. How can I be helpful?
Definitely special ingredients here, and with your background in real estate and being able to visualize and being able to sort of spec out what the center could potentially be and look like, your background in entrepreneurship, building businesses, building companies, and obviously then coupling, John, who's a special individual who's been able to lead this organization here with events, talking about innovation and so forth. So there's been a lot of special again, ingredients that has really kind of propagated this innovation center to where it is today with, as John talks about, so many areas of opportunity for continued growth.
Right. And
here.
so when you talk about, where does the vision come in? Well, we started this with the vision of where could it be, and what the vision was, and what we're working toward is world class, being a tipping point here in Broward County in South Florida, to become a tech hub of really giving back to the community by providing entrepreneurs the ability to be mentored and helpful, and help them with their business plans, help them in raising money and getting to the next level. And so all of that comes into you have to create a place that people want to go to, which ultimately helps them build their businesses, which ultimately provides economic development, not only to them personally, but to the region, to the county, and then from a county standpoint, it's what they use in talking to companies around the country to relocate here because of the special partnership that we've created with the university and the county, which tells a prospective CEO anywhere in the country that this is a very progressive region. Now, could I have guaranteed that on day one? The answer is yes, I guaranteed it. Could I have achieved it? Well, it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes the right people to do that, and that's where John came in. It's got my name on the door, but the credit for building this and creating what the momentum we have is all John Wensveen's.
Well, I appreciate that, but it as you know, they say it takes a village, right? And what's interesting, and I don't know if you know this or not, but just in the last couple of weeks, Miami's taking the claim for it, but it's actually the greater Miami statistical area that we, by the federal government, have now been designated a climate tech hub. And there are about 30 partners that are involved in that process that made it happen. And NSU Levan Center is one of the stakeholders that's now on paper for helping bring that to fruition. And now there's work to be done to advance that. But the idea of a tech hub here in South Florida is certainly well on its way. And that's the first door that really solidifies it by a designation. So the community, the ecosystem is coming together, and it's organizations like this mixed with others that are truly leading to the success. So 5 years from now, it's unheard of. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to get there, right?
Well, and the other thing that happened in the last couple of weeks is we've got a designation from the federal government that we are a
a center of excellence.
We are a center of excellence.
Yeah.
In cybersecurity, in terms of what we provide, and so we've got this military grade cybersecurity range. We're building a volumetric capture studio with Sony. We're building an AI smart cities lab with Dell, and that's what I mean by success breeds success. You just keep your nose to the grindstone, and you just keep trudging forward. You don't listen to the naysayers. I call it keep the noise out, and you just keep going. One of the things that I've always found here at the university in talking to students is when students see somebody that's successful, they think it's a straight line from where they are to where we are. They think it's just college to success. What they don't realize is that is a very bumpy road.
And you've talked about that, and you lived it
right.
through a lot of those iterations of ups and downs, market, and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, even a Jeff Bezos at Amazon. I mean, do you know how many years of losses Amazon had? As a bookseller, before it started to make a profit. Do you know how many naysayers there were that said this is ridiculous? how many years can you continue to lose money? And then all of a sudden, it became what it is. So, it's hard to get everybody to agree, or even sometimes anybody to agree. But if you have an idea and you're going to put the time in to be successful, and if you're not successful, then don't be discouraged. Come back again, because it's a very, it's up and down and up and down. And even when you are successful, you still run into a bump in the road. There's always a recession. There's always a competitor. There's always somebody that's going to try and knock you out.
Yep. And speaking of Amazon and books, you have a book recently published on Amazon. Quickly, what is the title of the book and what's it about?
So the book is called Seeing Around Corners, and it's really a philosophy that I've had, since I can remember. And seeing around corners means what's behind the next door, what's behind the corner that you can't see, and that relates to, what is your lender going to do when your loan is up? What's going to happen when there's a recession? What's going to happen if you hire somebody who commits fraud or, creates a big problem for you? And anybody that thinks they're going to sail through life, and my comments don't only relate to business. They relate to health and personal and relationships and children. And so I have been blessed and trained myself to try to see around the next corner. So in 2007, when Paulson and Bernanke were suggesting it was going to be a soft landing, I didn't believe that because I have two eyes, and we were in the banking business. And so based on what I was seeing, it was not going to be a soft landing. And so we cut back, 2 years. We cut back in 2007, and Lehman didn't go broke until September of 2008. And I can tell you, when I say cut back, in the bank, we looked at every loan in 2007 to make sure that we thought it would survive. And we took a large write-off, or large write-down in loans in October of 2007. And our stock dropped like a rock. We were yelled at by investors. They called us, these cowboys from Florida making all these bad loans. And the SEC sued us for whatever, for our stock going down. And yet a year later, a year and a half later, we were in the worst recession, of our lifetimes, other than the depression in 29. And our SEC litigation actually went on for 10 years. And, we knew we had done the right thing, and we won that litigation. But we didn't, the SEC litigation for us was what I refer to as noise. And we just kept our head focused on what we needed to do, and felt the truth would ultimately come out. So seeing around corners is thinking strategically in everything you do. Is what can take you out? What, are you prepared for a health scare? Are you prepared for a health scare in your family? Unfortunately, we lost a daughter at 37 5 years ago. And, certainly that was not in our game plan. Certainly was not, was devastating to all of us. And when I say seeing around corners, we could not have seen around that corner, but we're prepared for changes, and we're prepared for terrible things that can happen. And that's the part of seeing around corners. What happens if you go bankrupt? What happens if you lose your money? What happens if your great idea turns out to be a bust or nobody believes in you? And what happens if somebody in your family, has a terrible accident or tragedy in health? And seeing around corners is, can you survive that? Can you survive it mentally? Can you survive it financially, and be able to, get up and get through it and continue to move on. So that's what the book is about.
And I love it. The tagline to the book is perseverance, grit, and luck. And certainly, we are very lucky that you have helped contribute, help support the Levan Center here, and build it to where it is today, and obviously for the foreseeable future. And thank you so much for all the work that you do from your philanthropy, you and your wife and the Levan family, and certainly supporting the community. And all of this helps create and bolster, the county and really within the entire state of Florida. So thank you for all the work that you do, Alan.
Thank you. And it's a nice media studio you have here, guys.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
and if anybody's interested in buying my book, it is on Amazon.
Absolutely.
Alan Levan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jim.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Sunshine Startups Live podcast, and follow us on social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the show, please email us at booking@sunshinestartups.live.